Okay.
We'll give it a little more time. Let folks come on in. So is this all that we're expecting?
Yeah, I think we just got one more who's going to be popping in here soon, but
Okay.
we're good to go ahead and get started.
All right. So, first of all, I would like to say thank you so very much for allowing me the opportunity to come today and share not only about traumatic brain injury, but one of the things that we face often here in Alaska and nationwide, but because we live in Alaska, is highly important. How do you engage with somebody that experiences a traumatic brain injury or acquired brain injury? These are important questions that we kind of theorize and philosophize about, but the practical application often goes missing because it is not an area of focus in Alaska. However, over the past 3 decades, and I've been here all of my life, so in that introduction I'll give you, some more about myself, but for a little over 3 decades, we've really missed the mark when it comes to mental health and traumatic brain injury. And so today, we're gonna actually talk about that some more, and coming from a perspective of someone that actually has a traumatic brain injury and has grown up in the traumatic world. I had a haircut yesterday, but this isn't a part that they gave me. That's actually due to the brain surgery I had in 2005, where they took a portion out. So I like to say that in the very beginning, so you understand that you're talking to somebody and engaging with somebody that not only does this professionally, but is a lived experience for me. And as we go through the presentation, I'm one of those people, I like engagement. So if you have a question, please pop your hand up. I will stop so that we can engage. There's also a time in the end where there's questions and answers. So with that said, talking today about the progression of, I have to read it for myself, the progression of independent living in a traumatic world, personal reflections of personal and lived experience. Now, how many took a dum-dum? I passed them out earlier. Okay, there's a very specific reason why I hand those out. And I'm about to tell you, but here's where the first engagement happens. As we go around and you're comfortable sharing, I want to know what you picked, how many you picked, and why you picked what you picked. So, may we start on this side on the left and start going around?
Well, since I already had a baked potato in front of me, I didn't really need a dum-dum, but I just picked it to be, because it felt like it was the social right move to make.
Okay.
So that you felt like your gift was being received.
Thank you so much.
Pick Moldova because, well, I always think of dum-dums like I was a little kid, so Moldova seemed like a good choice.
It's better than the bazooka. That's not going to go hard after 3 years.
But I picked it because, or I grabbed one, only one, because when somebody, half Korean, so when somebody offers you something, you can't be rude and not take at least one.
Thank you.
I didn't have much choice, but
I mean, it was for her. Because I didn't know if she was gonna need one. She's so nice to have for me.
Okay. So you didn't get,
I wasn't missing, but they were passing it.
Okay, all right. So let me ask you a question. What was picked for you, and do you like it?
Yes. Strawberry.
Strawberry?
Strawberry.
Okay. So you like strawberry? Okay.
I picked one, blue raspberry, because I will never say no to a dum-dum, because they're amazing, like every color, every flavor. But I picked blue because it's my favorite color.
Right. Okay. Favorite color? That's one of my favorite colors. I like blue and red, and then just turn it into purple and everything works out.
There you go.
think watermelon is one of my favorite flavors. I don't like watermelon, but I like the flavors.
Really? Oh, wow.
Can tell you.
I was over there, adding the condiments to my plate, and, so my colleague here picked one for me, and she said, I don't know what it is, and I said, well, that's interesting, it's covered in question marks. And so, I don't know, but I think it worked out quite nicely, it was kind of funny. And again, I'm eager to participate and be part of that, the idea of sharing in this event.
Yeah.
Jake, you want to go?
I picked two, but I was told that it was part of the game, but I've actually put them back. I don't want dum-dums, thank you.
Okay.
I picked lemon. Lemon.
Lemon?
It was in a green wrapper.
So I'm another person who loves dum-dums, so thank you. It's right there with you. And I picked nectarine, or not nectarine, it's peach mango. I saw the peach on there look like a nectarine for me, so hey, that's one association there, but I also love peaches. And because it's one of my favorite flavors.
Right on. Do you like the presidents of the United States? Yeah.
That one's,
Yeah. Millions of peaches, peaches for free.
That's stuck in my head for the next week, but yes, I love it.
So I was actually not in my seat until somebody grabbed me one, but there were two on here, and I asked, why do I have two? And then I gave one to whoever's stuff is here.
Okay. What flavors did you
It was between like the mystery flavor and I think lemon lime, and I chose the mystery flavor.
Okay. Okay.
Daring woman.
Yes. Mystery. And Halloween's coming? Ooh, how appropriate.
I ended up with the fruit punch one. I just grabbed one because I think they're all good. So,
All right. Okay.
I just discovered it's a mystery flavor is better. I never had one, and I'm not really looking forward to trying it either, but
I appreciate that, though. I appreciate that, honestly. It's important.
Yeah, so that's what I have.
I might give it to somebody who really cherishes it.
There's a few in here.
We can get in line.
I picked this because I was told it might be part of an activity because I don't really like dum-dums either. And I picked strawberry because in case I had to eat it, it's closest to cherry.
That's pretty
I
good.
thought I might be okay with it.
So, thank you, everyone, for participating. Now, here's why this is important. What everybody in here just did is responded to internal and external stimulus. At very simple level, that is acquired and traumatic brain injury. Responding to inner and outer stimulus. So, some of you chose one because I like grape, or it reminded me of this, or from family they taught me if you're offered a gift, you take it. So you responded to an outer stimulus as well as an inner stimulus. Now, why is that important? I'll give you an example, and I just like to be transparent when I share these things. I could have a seizure right now and you wouldn't know it if I didn't tell you. And most of you in here are thinking, what do we do if you have a seizure? So the kind of seizures that I have now is called simple partial epilepsy. Has anybody ever heard of simple partial epilepsy? So internally, I know what's happening, and it's quite frightening. I don't like it at all. It's like a roller coaster. However, I'm allowed and able to continue in conversation and my daily doings as I'm here. But just like you chose or had something chosen for you, you responded to an outer and inner stimulus. So when you're engaging with your clients that come in or as you're practicing and observing the world that we live in, think of outer and inner stimulus, because that is going to be your first assessment always, as opposed to what diagnoses are you fitting into based upon the DMS-5, the ASAM, or any other tool that you may use now or in the future as they are developed. I am here to put a face to what traumatic and acquired brain injury looks like, sounds like, and is, so that hopefully when you leave today, not just from this room, but when you lie your head down on your bed, you begin to think about ways in which you can engage with the people that you are passionate about, because in Alaska, being the #1 throughout the nation, having traumatic brain injury for various reasons, other than the fact ATV accidents, domestic violence, alcohol, fetal alcohol syndrome, and a plethora of other reasons. It is important to be able to start to engage from a different perspective, apart from just the normal practice of let's diagnose you and then send you on your way. But how do we integrate you, and how do you integrate me into the community that you live in a traumatic world? So, a little bit about where I come from. Like I said earlier, I grew up here, 1979. I went to school here, didn't graduate from college here. I went to college out of state. But I grew up in a home that was directly connected to Hope Cottage, or now as it's called, Hope Community Resource. And so I grew up around a community of people that experienced physical and mental disabilities. So as growing up in that community, there was never an abnormal aspect to it. But what I did get to see was how the abnormality of the people that I engaged with and lived with were treated. The very first time I ever saw a seizure, my friend John had walked up and he had his helmet and grabbed my chest. And I moved and ran. He fell back and I went to go talk to my mother. My mother gently told me John has epilepsy. And as a 7, 8-year-old boy, I don't know what epilepsy is. But what she didn't do is place a fear in me to run away from John. Now I just know that if John were to reach out to me again, more than likely, John is having a clonic-tonic seizure. Now, I'll also never be the person to tell you I know exactly what you're going through, even if you have yourself epilepsy. I was talking to a young lady earlier today who experiences epilepsy, and I told her the very same thing. I'm not going to tell you I know exactly what you're going through, although we both have epilepsy. There's over 40 different types of epilepsy, so therefore, how can I know what you're going through? Let alone that we are different people. But what I will tell people, and I encourage others to tell the people that they serve and that we serve, is I may not understand where you're at, absolutely, but I do understand absolutely and intimately how traumatic brain injury can and does derail your life in such a way that leaves you disoriented and without the necessary resource and a fear of who do I go to, where do I go? And so in my practice, in my personal life, as well as my professional life, I want people to know that I'm here to walk with you and not to proclaim that I know exactly what you're going through. Because not only am I an educator, I'm a learner first. Your best educators will always be your first learners. So the objective of this presentation is just caveat. Now, who is Access Alaska? I'll touch on that, but here is the disclaimer. I am no longer associated with Access Alaska. I made this appointment prior to not being associated with Access Alaska for various reasons. And if you would like to know, then you may ask me after this presentation aside. But I want you to know that as we go. I'm going to define what I mean when I say traumatic in the context of this conversation and presentation. I'm going to define what it means to be a tangible presence in a traumatic world, and describe ways in which to be with the people that we serve, and elaborate on how your past, your present, as well as your future may direct the trajectory in a traumatic world. And then questions and answers. And like I said in the beginning, if you have a question during the presentation, please don't be shy, because I'm very open to that. But if you'd like to save them for the end, do that as well. Now, I'll speak briefly on this because as a previous employee of Access Alaska, they are and I am who I serve. And what I mean by that is employees at Access Alaska, as I was, there's 56% of the folks that have some type of disability, whether that would be physical, mental, or traumatic brain injury, all types, seen or unseen. So most individuals, no matter who they are, well, look, we want to know that we're cared about, that I have dignity, that you see me and not my disability. As I said earlier, I could have a seizure and you wouldn't know it. So then, how could you see me authentically while not seeing what impedes or impacts my life emphatically? We're a community of individuals that directly and indirectly experience all types of disabilities. Like I said earlier, even before I had epilepsy myself, I was impacted by the community I lived with, who were family to me. Though I did not have their disability, they were my family. They were close to me and are close to me. And therefore, I am impacted, just like you shared earlier. I was taught if you're given a gift, you take it. That's an impact. That's what you've been taught. So therefore, we must also be teachers and educators of what it means to not just assimilate, but to integrate all people that experience disability. Now, why should this matter to you? Well, and why does it matter to me as one who experiences a traumatic brain injury? According to health, here's where the traumatic definition is in context of here. It could be physical, spiritual, psychological, emotional. It is a response to something that has happened to you. And in some ways, I want to make sure that I say this to, I know that in some ways I'm preaching to the choir, because everyone in here, these are not foreign terms, they're not foreign ideologies, but there is a specific place to where we're going with this as it concerns traumatic and acquired brain injury. So then, I'll just read it aloud. I know that you read it, but it helps me to read it out loud as I process through. According to Healthline, a traumatic event is an incident that causes physical, emotional, spiritual, or psychological harm. The person experiencing the distressing event may feel threatened, anxious, or frightened as a result. In some cases, may know not how to respond, or maybe denial of the effect that it has had on their life. Most people that I've spoken to, that I know for sure that they have a traumatic brain injury, say, no, I don't have that. No, I don't. But this is after having an extensive conversation with him, and I'll share one instance. I'll call him Fred to be HIPAA compliant and kind to my friend. My friend Fred works on the slope. He started to have headaches. The doctor prescribed him pain medications. One of those pain medications was ibuprofen. Ibuprofen is also known as what? A blood thinner. And he noticed his head started to swell, so we went to the ER. Tell myself hello. And he noticed his head starting to swell. He went in, they saw that he had a blood clot on his right hemisphere of his brain, close to his temporal lobe. If he had went 2 more days, more than likely, due to the blood thinner that he was taking, that blood clot would be released and he would have died. This is a no-brainer and no pun intended. It is what it is. I've kept in touch with Fred. Fred has now been released to go back to work. But in the midst of it, even while he was dealing with it, I said, what is your biggest concern right now? And he said, me and my wife need to pay our bills. And I said, well, here's the good news. And it's not going to sound like good news to you, but you actually have an acquired brain injury. You had a blood clot. They had to drill in and take that blood clot out. Now you have a distortion in your brain based on a blood clot that was not your fault. But what do you need? We need help financially. You can go to Alaska Brain Injury Network because now you qualify for the grants that are there based on having an acquired brain injury. Second of all, what vitamins are you taking? I don't take any. Take B1, thiamine, because thiamine is going to be the building blocks for your brain to actually recover and stay recovered to the best of its ability. I checked in with him this past week and I said, did you get the vitamin B1 yet? He says, no, I didn't. And I got very stern. He's my friend. I've known him for a while. And I said, you have to get the vitamins. If you do not, because of the stress load of going back to work, your brain is not going to be able to operate in the ways it needs to operate. So do it, because you're going to stop, hopefully, the secondary and tertiary effects of having now an acquired brain injury. Because as we all know in this room, once you have a concussion, you have a traumatic brain injury. You have your mild, your moderate, and your severe. And so he just has a moderate, I would say moderate. His doctors may say different, but that's not the point. The point being is, there is a possibility for something else to happen, and if you do not take the proper steps right now that are preventative, you will indeed suffer the recourse of not making sure that your brain health is taken care of. So, he lives in a traumatic world. I live in a traumatic world. If you have ever experienced a concussion or have had a brain surgery, you have a TBI. I don't know whether that's mild, moderate, or severe, but I do know this, that at some level, you live in a traumatic world. Now, what does it mean to be a tangible presence? The word tangible comes from our Greek word tangere, to touch. What do you think about when you think of the word tangible? Anyone? Usually we think of tangible as I can physically touch your hand. But tangible, in this sense, in this presentation, in this world that we live in, is not so much what you can touch, but what you have been touched by. So when I'm sitting down and I'm having a conversation with a friend or a consumer or client, the one thing that I want them to know is that I'm a tangible presence in their life. Not just, hey, how are you doing, and shake your hand, but to know that what I'm sharing with you is something that you can take with you, so that if you are dealing in distress or trying to troubleshoot something, you can remember, William told me this, this is what's going to be helpful. Now I can operate and continue on and not continue to escalate because I don't have the resources or the answers that are necessary for me to engage effectively. Now, there's two examples that I would like to share. There's a thin line between law and humanity. Most of us in this room, when you think of a thin line, there's a thin line between. You may hear the song, there's a thin line between love and hate. It was funny to me. But there is a thin line between law and humanity. I want to treat you as a person first, and then I want to help you understand why it is I do what I do by the steps that I take, but not dismiss you, but rather include you into the process. There was a gentleman that I worked with who suffers from agoraphobia. And for him, the things that he does is goes outside of the city to his specific place. So he drives a long way to get away so that he can recuperate and take care of his mental health. So as we worked together, we looked at the Mental Health Trust Grant, and they don't give out money for gas. They won't give a gas card, understandably so. Nor does Avon. But we figured out a way where he was able to fully document how and why he needs the source that he needs, meaning gas money, to take his trip. And he had his doctor fill out a thoroughly documented documentation so that he could receive some sort of funding. And through that work, him advocating, learning to effectively advocate, not just to myself, but also advocate to his doctor why this is important, he was able to take his trip. So when you're working with your clients, one of the things that I always share is be sure that you tell your doctors or your therapists or psychiatrists to help document exactly what needs to be said so that you may receive the resources that are necessary for you to engage in life, not just as you know it, but that will allow for you to stay healthy. So please, when someone is going for a grant in this state and saying, this is what I need and it's going to help me this particular way, please fully document extensively how it's going to help, because that's what they're looking at when they're giving grants out. Is it medical? Is it a need? Or is this just wishful thinking? And so I always direct people to ask and build a relationship with their doctors and with their psychiatrists and with their therapists to fully document why it's a need. Now, I'm going to show this video right here. Can I do that with this clicker, or do I need to do that through?
I think you'll need to do it through the keyboard and mouse.
Okay. So this is a short film. This is Frank Box. And Frank Box is the manager of the durable medical equipment at Access Alaska. Frank Box is also one other certified brain injury specialist at Access Alaska, and he will tell you his story through the video, the mini documentary. All right. Where is the sound?
It could be on mute. He hit escape.
Let's see here. So there's not one down there. Let's go over here. That's up. That's up. Is the do the speakers come over the head or?
Yeah,
Absolutely, please.
this computer can be a little.
Technology, they made it to be better, but. heard something. There.
What do you think? You
Thank you
need
so
something?
much.
Think? Yeah.
Is everyone able to see
There
fine?
you go, that's my girl. Neuroplasticity is the clinical definition of hope. The brain finds itself when it moves and not before. So it's like when you take a step, you're actually falling until the other foot catches you. So sometimes you need to just start failing forward and then get your feet underneath you as you go. So you got to put yourself in motion to find out where you're at. So my first knowledge that something was wrong is I had a seizure on April 14th, 1998. They found a plum-sized tumor in the front part of my brain. All of the gas went out of my spirit, and I knew I was pretty well a dead guy. I said a lot of prayers because up here, you're going into the hard drive, you're worried that as soon as people start tinkering around there, oh my God, I hope they don't get those memories that are really special to me. Not just my phone number, but who everybody is, you know, how to shift the 4-speed, what my babies felt and sounded like when they were born. There's just so many things that I didn't want to ever lose because they're who I was. Yeah, I had so many great people in my life. I did not survive by just medical treatments alone. I had no idea that I could be vulnerable and people would want to help save me. My name is T. Frank Box, and I am an independent living advocate and the Durable Medical Equipment Manager for Access Alaska. DME is a reuse program where we take donated medical equipment and put it back in service for the community to use at no cost. Well, and it's amazing the people that we help are people in crisis. People that will almost break my ribs hugging me, they're so happy. When you can give somebody hope when they have none, that's a great job. Sometimes we just sit and problem solve with somebody and we don't give them anything else except just help them problem solve something that they've never even thought about doing.
I'm singing in the rain, singing in the rain.
Don't be doing any flossing over there. My independence looks different than everybody else's because we're all different. Nobody really knows from my outward appearance that I have challenges. My recovery is going pretty well, but it is still a recovery. You're never done. You have to find yourself where you're at. You have to be in motion. And I'm always hopeful that things can get better and continue to get better. Well, if I could go back in time, that lack of faith that things were going to work out, I would do everything I could to dispel that. Being willing to take a step and trust and not fear falling, because if there's not somebody there to catch you and stop you from falling, there'll be somebody to come along and help pick you up and put you on the right track.
Right now. Jumping back. Is it F5 on here too?
F5 will take you to the beginning, but if you go to the lower, on your side, the right-hand corner, you'll see the, right next to the Zoom bar. On the other
Right on. That's all right. That's all right. I mastered the clicker, so that helps out a whole lot. So I would encourage folks, so when you have somebody, if it's you yourself or someone that comes in and is in need of any durable medical equipment, I'm going to say this very firmly. There is a suggested donation. However, it is a free service to the community. And objectively speaking, we all know and understand that insurance can be a mess. So if you have somebody that says, my insurance won't pay for something, you're able to go to Access Alaska and request the things that someone needs, whether that's you yourself, a friend of yours, a family member, and they will do the best that they can to serve the community where they're at. So, the essence of being. So when you hear the word being, what comes to mind? Living? I like that.
Presence.
Presence? So, I'm being with you in this room. We often may say, I'll be at dinner with you at 5, or I'll be at the store, or I'll be fill in the blank. But being is not doing. Being is not doing. It is being a presence. I once had a friend of mine sit with me when I was having a really tough time. And there was no advice that he could give me that was going to change my circumstance or make me feel better about my circumstance. We've all ran into individuals as such, whether that be our friends, ourselves, or family members. But he was there with me, and he was being. He was a presence with me. A presence of peace, knowing that I'm going to be okay because somebody cared enough just to be with me. Not trying to fix my problem, but to be with me in the midst of it. Most of us have all heard the adage, practice makes perfect, but I disagree. It is praxis that makes the difference. Everyone in here, you've heard of the word praxis, yes? I love the word praxis because it really opened up the door for me to understand what it means to engage in the world that I live in. So according to the Cambridge Dictionary, the process of using a theory or something that you have learned in a practical way. But why is this important? If I only practice riding a bike for, not for sport, but if I practice riding a bike to perform, then I'll perform well. But I know nothing outside of performing on my bike. I don't know what it means to go for a leisurely stroll on the beach. Well, we don't really have beaches in Alaska. You know, we got a lot of rock beaches. And I don't know what it means to just enjoy it, but to do what I've practiced to do, as opposed to take what I've practiced and then actually put them in context where I am in that moment. So I have a couple of examples of this. Again, names have been changed for HIPAA purposes. Patty C. Baker's Man, or Patty Cakes Baker Man. I like to play on words and just try to make things as gentle and lively, funny as possible. Because as you enjoy things when you're learning, they stick, and you're really creating healthy neural pathways that can be directed and redirected so that you can engage effectively. Now, Patty C. Bakerman would come into the appointments with me, and at a certain point, Patty sat and said, "William, you know who you remind me of?" And I said, "Who?" you remind me of my brother. And I said, oh yeah? Yeah, he was my favorite brother. He's dead. That hit my chest because they shared with me something that was intimate for them. Their favorite brother has passed, and I remind them of that. Well, it's not my job, and it's not my desire to try to make you feel better about, well, I'm glad that, I remind you of your family member. Rather, that puts in perspective where you're at and what you're allowing me into. Again, this does wrap into traumatic brain injury. Because as people become not just familiar with you, but know the authentic you, they will then begin to show the authentic them. And so, they lost their brother, but what that meant for us is that they're willing to open up. Now, I need to do the homework of what it looks like to be an effective presence and just be what I need to be in the moment for them. Another example would be Rainy Day. Rainy would come in to Access, Alaska, often in a hypermanic state due to substance use disorder. Now, there was also times where Rainy would come in base level and have coherent, authentic conversation that wasn't based off of delusion or trauma that is lived every single day. So we finally came up with a protocol. So this is what needs to happen. If Rainy comes in, we just need to call the EMTs, because the EMTs are a presence of peace for them so that they can get the help that they need. On this particular day, I asked my coworker, I said, call the EMTs, but make sure that the officers are not the first to respond. Not because officers are bad, but because introducing officers based on experience, past experience, that's a trigger and a mix for what? Expedient escalation. And so once my coworker got off the phone, I said, did you tell them that the officers cannot be the first contact? And he said, oh, I forgot. I jumped on the phone fast, called 911, got the please hold. And I'm like, I can't hold. Finally, someone came on the line and I explained to them the situation. I said, you just had someone call about this situation. But when you send out the EMTs, please get on the radio right now. Tell the EMTs and the officers, EMTs need to be the first ones in here, not the officers. I came out. Who was the first contact? The officers. Here's the good thing about it. The hidden blessing and the blatant blessing of it. They already knew Rainy. But I was still a bit frustrated because that easily could have gone the other way in a bad and horrific way. Thankfully, they were able to talk. The EMTs came in. That helped also to de-escalate. But why was that important for Rainy? And what is the significance for me? And what is that significance for you working here in the population that you work with? If I didn't know the history and I hadn't have built a relationship with Rainy where I was just being, they were just being, and we were building that connection, officers would have came in and boom, trigger. Now we have a multiple compounded fracture of a situation. And that's the last thing that I wanted. That's the last thing any of us want. So then that, though, is, both of these are the outcome of being with those whom we serve. So now, how does our past, our present, and our future influence direct and our trajectory in life in a traumatic world? Some more examples. Now the past, Wilberforce. Now, Wilberforce is my friend. I unashamedly say that Wilberforce is my friend. I worked with Wilberforce for 2 years. And Wilberforce experienced trauma growing up and would stuff their emotions continually. Wilbur is also older than I am. I'm just about to turn 40. But they have lived experience that I don't have. So one of the very things that I needed to do and wanted to do in the practice that we all do is help me understand your story. And they would share with me what they were stuffing and why they were stuffing. And it finally got to a point where Wilbur started to cry in our meetings. And what happens when somebody cries as the counselor and you're sitting there, and if I'm sitting with you and I start to cry, what is one of the very first things I may say to you? Sorry. I immediately stop and I say, no, you don't need to be sorry. As a matter of fact, this is the right place to do it. You can cry and do whatever you need to do as long as we're working towards the goals that we have laid out for ourselves. And so as time went on, every session, Wilbur would come in and more than likely would cry about something. But then they started to identify the tears. Well, these aren't sad tears. These are happy tears. Or these aren't happy tears, these are angry tears. Or I'm not sure what tears those are, but I'm going to figure it out. And they began to come out of the skin that they were under when it came to stuffing their emotion. Everybody I worked with has traumatic brain injury. So it's important for me to sit back and understand where people are coming from so that when they escalate or when they cry, when they get angry, that I know it's not me. It's easy for us, and we've been taught that they're not angry at you, they're not doing this at you. It's too easy to dismiss saying they're not doing it to you or it's not against you. Rather, it has to be my practice to understand and put myself as close as I can, as they allow me to, and as they will allow you to understand what's going on so they know that they can process with you what it is they're feeling, whether it's because of what has happened, what may happen, or what theoretically is happening inside. Because remember, traumatic brain injury is an inner stimulus, a response to an inner and an outer stimulus. The things that we don't absolutely know. So building these relationships will be imperative to not just recovery, but to a life worth living. So now with Wilbur, he wanted to move into his own place. And he was nervous about moving into his own place and doing the walkthrough. So he asked me, he said, William, would you do the walkthrough with me? Because I want to make sure that everything is okay. I said, yeah, man, I will do that with you. He came to the office, and we walked from the office to his new apartment. And we went over the contract and read it and joked and laughed as we walked, the blocks to his apartment. But why is that important? Because it showed that I'm willing to be a presence in your life, walking alongside you, just being. Because I'm not just teaching, I'm learning. My success, your success, our success is not predicated on what I do. It is predicated upon the relationship that we build. So when Wilbur moved into his apartment, it was his success, and I got to enjoy celebrating with him. Next is the present. Actively engaging with our community to let them know what we are willing to do and desiring to do with them, but not for them. To further their desire to have their essential needs met, especially for those to have necessary means to communicate it for themselves. Listen, it's not my job, and it's not our job to give anybody a voice. I do not believe that. I do not give you a voice. I help you use the one that you already have. If I give you a voice, I've dictated to you who I am and what you should do. But if I help you learn how to use the voice that you already have, then now you've become an effective advocate for yourself and a true indeed friend with me. So, for an instance, I'm a poet, and my writing style can be very edgy. I once wrote a poem that said, "They turn their back on me, now I'm looking at their backside. Got me so hot now I want to kick in their backside. If this is not amended, if it's not contended, I guess you could say that it's safe to say that your boy is about to backslide." That's just how I feel. Now that's an example of me being able to communicate with my voice. It is then, gives then the opportunity of others to say, what does that mean? Help me to understand so that I can effectively and affectively engage with you. So we don't do for people what they can do for themselves, but that does not mean not doing anything at all. It means I will walk with you, brother or sister, to your appointment or to the walkthrough of the apartment so that we are together doing it and I can highlight what you have done to point out to you how brilliant you truly are. Now, Lois Lane came in, and this is also important to this. Lois Lane is another made-up name, unless you are a comic book geek and like Superman. I like Superman, but I can't fly. So Lois Lane came in and has a wheelchair, and the wheelchair is supposed to lean back, but the wheelchair wasn't leaning back. And objectively speaking, again, it wasn't time for insurance to kick in and pay for the repairs that were needed. So Lois Lane came in with her PCA workers, who I knew, and asked Frank Box to look at the wheelchair. Frank worked on that wheelchair until that wheelchair actually worked. When Lois Lane left, there was a need that had been met. And you know how that need was met initially? Because the people that work with Lois Lane, though Lois is quote unquote nonverbal, she is speaking. She does have a voice. And so when you see somebody sitting crooked in a chair but they can't speak as you hear me speaking verbally, but you can see the intonation of the crinkles on their face or the groans or grunts, you know what those are because you have developed a relationship that says, I know your language. And if I know your language, I know how to try to find the resources. Once I find the resources, now I know how to help and then advocate on your behalf so that you have gone about your daily life being able to live in a world, though it may be traumatic. The future, both the nature and nurture, and we've all heard this for sure, nature and nurture, have weight to add to this part of the equation. In what way? We all have to ask the question, what or who truly shaped me as a person all of the years I've been alive? Like I said in the very beginning, I grew up in a Hope Cottage home or Hope Community Resource home. That very much so developed me, shaped and molded me, and allows me to move within the disabled community in such a way, not only as an observer, but as a participant, and then to also have the honor and pleasure to stand here before you and other groups to share how do you engage in a world that you know of, but you don't know intimately. the two differences between knows. You've got your I know of and I know intimately. I know this is a skeleton, but I could not tell you what muscles are where. I know these are ribs, but I do not know the technical information. So outside of my realm, I could not have an intellectual or effective communication or discussion with a doctor, saying, this is this, I know that's a sternum and whatever else. But what I can do is say, tell me what's going on in your brain. My eyes are really sensitive. That's your occipital lobe. Something's going on there. What have you asked your doctor to do? They said they were going to do a CT scan. No, you need an MRI. Your CT scan is your Polaroid. Your MRI is your 3D. Even better yet, your functional MRI with contrast is your continued view into what is actively happening. Because I'm trained this way, and because I have a traumatic brain injury, I can enter into those conversations. However, that's what we need to bring into the frame when we're engaging with people, is how not only to educate, but integrate the education part of it into a praxis of, here's how this looks like lived out for you. This is what it looks like. When someone comes to you, or in this case on the slide, Access Alaska, asking for help in various areas of their life, we must establish and in some cases reestablish, because how many people have had somebody on your caseload and all of a sudden they just drop off, you don't know where they're at? Yeah? Well, a very transparent and person-centered approach to not only clearly define the working relationship, but intentionally foster a peer support system that fortifies and supports acceptable expectations for consumers and their advocate, or at very base level, a person interpersonal skills. What am I saying when I say that? There was a young man I worked with his mother, and he was one of the people that dropped off of my caseload for a while, and I hadn't heard from him. And one day I got a call, William, we're so sorry we haven't been coming in for the appointments. I'm just like going on 3 months. And I said, well, what's going on? Tell me what's happening. And I'll call him Sam. That's not his real name. Sam's been going through rehab and he's doing so great. And Sam is on the phone with his mom. And I said, is he there? Yeah. I said, Sam, I want you to know something. I'm not mad at all. Matter of fact, I'm highly proud of you because you are doing exactly what we have talked about in our meetings. You are beginning to take action and advocating for yourself so that you have a better life. Due to having a traumatic brain injury, you need to be able to do these things. The ratio when it comes to traumatic brain injury is 2 to 1. Men have a higher level or a higher propensity for substance use disorder after a traumatic brain injury than women. But both, if either or, have had a substance use disorder prior to traumatic brain injury, it will exponentially go higher. So for the men that you work with that have had a traumatic brain injury, let them know, be careful what you bring into your system, whether that be alcohol, marijuana, crack, and all the other drugs under the sun. But also, because, and I'll just say this, because it's legalized, a lot of people smoke marijuana in Alaska. And a lot of the people that were on my caseload smoke marijuana. I don't have an issue with it. However, when they would explain to me how they were feeling, I would say, well, tell me something. What strain are you smoking? What do you mean, what strain? Are you smoking an indica or a sativa? I don't know. And that gave me the opportunity, because I studied for myself, to help them understand the detriment that they're placing themselves in. One gentleman, I said, look, if you're smoking a sativa, which is your cerebral high, that tends to make you, really anxious and whatnot, you're putting yourself at danger based on the other medications that you're also taking to end up in the hospital in a worse condition than you are. And in our conversation, they were able to actually find a better option than just using the marijuana for legitimate purposes. They are legitimate. However, my concern is your safety, because your brain is doing something that you don't have control over ultimately, but I want to help you be preventative about. These are the kind of things that we want to do. Introduce people to their peer supports. If you're a peer to the people that you work with, but due to maybe policy or procedure, which is understandable, find somebody and help them. Point them in the right direction. ABIN, Alaska Brain Injury Network, has peer support groups, both for the vets, for families, for parents who are taking care of their children that have a disability of many sorts. Side note, did you know that the caregivers that experience the highest level of stress are who? Parents that take care of their children who have a disability. And it is a growing rate of parents that are taking care of their children who are on the latter side of life and age, taking care of their adult children. That is not said to shame anyone at all, but it is a reality. The moment you find a peer support group of resource for a family or an individual, you're going to see exponential difference. I had a mom who was able, we found that peer support group for their child. You know what the mom did? She said, William, I'm going on vacation. Out of the country. And I said, really? She said, yeah, I'm going on vacation. That blessed my heart, because I know the struggle that they've been through. And so for them to be able to say, there is something that can be done, I don't have to worry about my child as much. I can go and take care of myself, and my child is taken care of well. Amen. And so then, I like to say it like this. People are people, and I'm a people too. I was today talking, when I was going to get my watch fixed, and I was talking to the young lady, and I was saying, yeah, I'm about to go do a training. She said, well, what do you do? And I told her I'm a traumatic brain injury specialist, and then told her I have epilepsy. She said, you have epilepsy? I was like, yeah, I do too. I said, really? And we got into this conversation, and I was sharing with her my struggle and listening to her struggle and troubleshooting some ways in which we can do better, as I'm trying to do better and as she wants to do better. And then I said, well, man, I got to pay you for this watch fix, and because I got to go. And she says, no, you don't have to pay for it. I said, are you sure? She said, no, you don't understand what you just did. You gave me resources that I can actually act upon. That blesses my heart. This is my passion. I don't do this because I'm book smart. I do it because I'm called to do it. If your practice lacks passion, then you're in the wrong place. If your passion teaches you to go and to engage and dig deep, go. She wasn't on my caseload. She's fixing my watch. But guess what? She's a people, and I'm a people too. I care about humanity and the plight of humanity. That's what I'm here for. So, with that said, do you have any questions? And the caveat to that is this. If I do not know the answer, I'm going to do my very best to find it. Because the worst thing I do not like is asking a question, it's not my area, and then you don't have any resources to go off of. So with that said, do you have any questions?
For these support groups, is it a walk-in thing? If we have a patient that has a brain TBI that might benefit, can we just give them the date and time, or is there a referral process?
No, absolutely. You can walk directly in. One of the things I encourage is, because I know Alaska Brain Injury Network, they have their support groups, and Access Alaska has a head injury support group, as well as a cross disability group that meets, I believe it is every other Monday, which is really great. So you are welcome to just walk in. We had somebody at a head injury support group that came in, and they didn't know that it was a head injury support group, but they themselves dealt with diabetes. The beautiful thing about it, though, is they were welcomed into the group and got some very valuable information from those who were already there. So it's for anybody that would like to come.
So the Alaska Head Injury Support Group, when does that meet and where?
That is the first. So the head injury support group at Access Alaska meets first and third Tuesdays from 6 to 8 p.m. Throughout the month. And to solidify that information, it would be best also to give them a call and ask for Mike Friend. Yes, Mike, I'm putting you out on Front Street. Ask for Mike Friend, and he will be able to give you the information that is needed for that. He is our intake and referral specialist, and an almanac of information.
And the Alaska Brain Injury Network, their group is a Wednesday group, isn't it?
Yes, it's a Wednesday group. Yeah, and I would also encourage you to just give them a call, for theirs, and go on their website, because they actually have a calendar on their website that shows what group is going to meet what day and where.
You talked about some grants and resources available through the Alaska Brain Injury Network. What's the best way for us to help connect our patients to them?
So the best way, the very first thing I would tell anybody is get a verification of diagnosis from their doctor that says specifically, on the checkbox, traumatic brain injury, because they're going to ask for that. And as a matter of fact, if they go to Access Alaska, they're going to need the same thing dealing with a traumatic brain injury, a verification of diagnosis. But grant-wise, the next thing would be is telling your patients, go to your doctor and have them write out a narrative of why it's important to receive what you're asking for, such as one of the people I worked with, they needed shoes because they're diabetic, and I said, okay, get a letter from your doctor explaining why you need these specific shoes that are really expensive. Why is that a necessity? They got it, we presented the narrative, and they received the funding for the grant. That's the real big thing. And also to understand the tier system by which they decide. So your first of importance is your medical necessity. Your second would be, for instance, I had someone who wanted to go to school and they actually graduated. I'm super proud of them. They got their schooling paid for through Avon because it was continuing on in life while living in what? A traumatic world. And so they got their computer paid for as well as their schooling paid for. We had to do the appeal process a couple of times. And take note that with Avon, you can continue to apply and reapply as many times as you feel that you need to until you get what you need, because there's a lot of requests that do come in. However, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, with the mental health trust, it is not so much that way. You need to have an agency that is going to write the narrative that is, registered with them. But with AVEN, you don't need to have somebody that is registered agency with them. You need to have a verification of diagnosis. Yeah. Any other questions?
You mentioned you were a caseworker for people with traumatic brain injury. How does that get set up for people that could benefit from a caseworker?
How does that get, as in, how do they get the ball rolling for themselves? So, at Access Alaska, the name Mike Friend that I just told you about, people come in on their own. So, say for instance, if you were my care coordinator, and you called and said, hey, I want to fill out an intake referral, you'll be told that, well, William needs to call in and come in so that it is them asking for the service. And you can come in with him, and that's just based off of client, consumer directed, as opposed to, well, you're just gonna go do this because I said go do it. It's heavily based upon consumer direction. And after they fill out the intake and referral, there's two things. You have your general IL at Access Alaska, and then you have your TBI case manager. If they go in for their general, they are going to just have about 2 pages to fill out, and then some goals to write down. If they come in and they say, well, I have a traumatic brain injury, it's about 15 to 20 pages. But that'll be over the length of maybe a week to a month. I've had people, do it in a month. But it's a longer process because it's more intensive case management.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So, who is it that you primarily work with?
Anybody and everybody.
I love it.
Whoever walks in the door.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're primarily, we're a safety net clinic here in Anchorage, and so I think it's about 70% of our population has Medicaid, Medicare, uninsured. So we have a high population of people who have low socioeconomic status, difficulty accessing services that they need, and see quite a few of them to try and coordinate their care. There's a lot of medical, social, and psych comorbidities going on between all 3 of us, and spiritual as well. So,
Yes.
yeah, we kind of see a whole spectrum of people and different medical capacities.
And it's about to get a lot worse. With, objectively speaking, I'm not making this into a political rant by any means, so hear me clearly with that. Due to the things that are happening here in Alaska, and as well as nationwide, but in Alaska, we're going to see this winter, there's going to be a big spike in mental health deficit. And being able to network and get ahead of the ball in the way of being preventative care, that's going to be so important. Do you ever work with advocates?
Case coordinators, yeah.
Yeah, Bob and Nina. I enjoy them. They are a passionate people. And so connecting with them. And so there's one other thing that I want to highlight and share. And again, please hear me clearly. We generally say independent living. But independent has a connotation of, I do it by myself. And I'm not a proponent for independent living in that sense. I am an advocate and a proponent of interdependence, meaning that my independent living is based upon the community that I choose to engage with that allows for me to remain healthy. And just like Frank Box had said in the video earlier, you may not have somebody to stop you from falling, but to have somebody say, let me help you up. Come on, keep walking with me. That is wraparound services. That is interdependence. because for the past 30 plus years in Alaska, we have been very independent. And Alaskans, we have that kind of what is it? Character, thought of, we're independent, we're Alaskans. We go snowshoeing and, we grill outside when it's 30 below and, we fall off a mountain and get up and keep running. Well, that's all well and good. Play hard, work hard, that's okay. But how are you developing authentic and meaningful community? That is interdependence. I need you and you need me. That's not a prideful statement. That's where we're at. We need each other in order to do what we are created to do, what we love to do, and what we must do. Like my friend who hadn't taken his B vitamin yet. You must do it if you're going to get ahead of the possible effects and effects of traumatic brain injury. And lastly, one of the things I really want to encourage you to do if you're not doing already, I've spent the last 2 years reaching out to psychiatrists, psychologists, and I was, because my consumers would say, William, I need help, I need a counselor. I said, okay. And I call and I say, are you willing and able to work with people that experience traumatic brain injury? And the answer that we generally get, or I would generally get, is, no, we don't do that. We do emotional issues, relationship issues, marital issues, go down the line. Those are all possible fall-offs of traumatic brain injury and acquired brain injury. And so therefore, it is like stigmatizing somebody. In one training, I will not do it here. In one training, I walked up and I said, hi, my name is William. And they reached out, grabbed my hand, and as soon as they grabbed my hand, my name is William. I have AIDS. And they jumped. And I said, I don't have AIDS. I don't, I promise. The reason why I did it is because it's to use that as an example of the stigmatism that is placed on those who have a disability, whether seen or unseen, traumatic brain injury or acquired brain injury. We must move away from the stigmatism that because somebody has a traumatic brain injury or acquired brain injury, that they do not engage in which the same way a normal person may engage that has also emotional, physical, or other deficits that we're used to treating and engaging with. That has to stop, especially here in Alaska, where we need to understand better and effectively what is traumatic brain injury, what is acquired brain injury, and what does that mean for the person that has it. What does it mean for me? I'll tell you right quickly. I've been dead one time. My brother came in, I was at Harborview Medical Center, and having seizures like usual, because they take you off your medicine so they can find out if your epilepsy is diffuse or focal, and it's not really fun. Well, one day I had a seizure like usual, and I woke up and my brother was standing over me, and his eyes were as red roses could be, and the first thought in my mind was, this dude smoked without me. But I then saw tears coming out of his eyes. I said, what's wrong, Tom? He says, you died. I said, I didn't die. No, you died. And we're having an argument whether I died or not. And I'm glad that I didn't win the argument. But the doctor came and said, yes, Mr. Bynum, you were dead, clinically dead, and we had to bring you back. That was huge. That's huge. Because I didn't see any white lights. I just woke up and thought everything was over. Well, thankfully it wasn't over. But 4 months after, I went to college. I published a book. I'm an author. I'm a scholar. I'm a philosopher, a theologian. I'm many things, but those many things do not make me up as who I am. The same can be said and is true for those in whom we serve. You may have a traumatic brain injury, but you and I are not our traumatic brain injury or acquired brain injury. I am William H. Bynum III, see this, and I thank you so very much, honestly and genuinely, for the opportunity to share with you not only what I've studied, but what I live, because this is my passion. And so my greatest hope is that I get to pass along to you my passion. So when you engage with people that are dealing with things such as I, that you're engaging with them and inviting them to be authentically themselves, with the expectation that they take what you teach and what you have learned and go do it out there too. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Would you like for me just to close this out? There. We won't do that.
I'm gonna need to reset to.
Thank you for taking the time to come.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for inviting me to come.
Can I eat my nut now?
Yes.